All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Laura with the Plano Public Library, and I want to thank you all for joining us for today's program. Please note your microphone and video have been turned off. Questions, you can type them into the chat. Sahar will be monitoring the chat to assist you with any issues and bring questions to my attention. We will also be sure to leave time for questions at the end. I do have a few housekeeping reminders that I'd like to share with everyone. Please note that this program is being recorded and will be made available on the Plano Public Library YouTube page for later viewing. Soliciting business or selling merchandise during library virtual programs is prohibited. Please show respect for our presenter and one another throughout the program. Zoom provides live captioning. This option is available down below in the Zoom toolbar. All right, well, welcome to creating a backyard bird paradise. Today, we're going to talk about making your yard enticing to your neighborhood birds, the reasons why having a bird-friendly yard is good for the environment and for you, and resources you can utilize on your journey to your backyard bird paradise. So we'll start out with the basics. Why feed the birds? And Sir David Attenborough has a lot to say on birds, and he describes the bird as a very accessible, close, and universal creature. So it is a great way to interact with the environment around you, no matter where you are. So there are several reasons to feed your backyard feathered friends. One reason is they improve your mental health. A 2019 bird watching study by the American Psychiatric Institution found that 7 out of 10 people experienced a positive change in their mental health after bird feeding for just 1 week. You can also build a community. Feeding birds is an accessible hobby that you can participate in from your very own home. And bird watchers are an active community with options to participate in bird research and outings with other birders. It is also an opportunity to participate in conservation. So a recent study found that the North American bird population is down by 2.9 breeding adults. When we think of population loss, we typically think of endangered species out in the wild, like elephants, whales, or bison. And while this decline does affect all species of birds, it is especially notable because common birds have suffered the greatest loss. More than 90% of the losses come from just 12 families, which includes sparrows, blackbirds, and finches. And these are common backyard feeder visitors. By feeding birds and creating a backyard bird paradise, you are giving them food, water, and habitat space that gives these birds a safe environment to thrive in. So what is it that our birds need? There's just 4 things that they really need to survive: food, water, shelter, and a place to nest. And each of these are easy to add to your backyard. We're going to go into detail for each element, and let's go ahead and start with food. So food is crucial to a bird's survival. While this is obvious for all living creatures, there are some species of bird that will not survive a cold night if they don't get the right amount of food during the day. And one way to provide food for your birds is to plant it. Native plants are always the best choice. They meet the needs of the wildlife that is already here, and they are suited for our environment and climate. I planted a native pollinator garden last spring, and I have never watered it. These plants thrive in a hot, dry summer. I reference the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center database to see if the plants I want to plant are native. And you can search by a plant's scientific or its common name, and each entry also details who likes to eat that plant, so you can target certain species if you wish. And then you are also able to locate native plant nurseries with a directory on the Native Plant Society of Texas website, referred to as NICE. And a bonus of planting for the birds is that at the same time, you can encourage pollinators to your yard. Bees and other insects will also provide for the food for the birds. Another way to provide food is to put out feeders. There's a lot to consider here, so let's start by looking at some of the different feeder options. So the first option is ground feeder. This is the no feeder feeder. Simply scatter food in an accessible area. While most all birds will eat from the ground, there are some species, like doves, that prefer to eat off the ground. And when I feed my birds on the ground, I put it on my patio. I also like to kind of scatter it in between the leaves so that they can forage and encourage those natural behaviors. The next option is a hopper feeder. Now, these are typically large and they can hold a lot of seed. They have a perching area that can accommodate birds of different sizes, and they do have a roof that protects both the seeds and the birds from the rain. Now, tube feeders are similar to hopper feeders. They can hold a lot of food. They usually have multiple access openings that have small perches, which helps to discourage large birds like grackles or doves from using the feeder. A platform feeder is a large, flat feeder that allows larger birds or a bird flock to feed. And it is best to use one with drainage holds or a mesh bottom at the bottom so that when it rains, it doesn't collect there. A suet feeder is a holder for suet, which is a high energy food made from rendered animal fat with nuts, fruit, or seed mixed in. Mesh cages around the feeder allows birds to perch and take bites from the suet. These are especially popular with woodpeckers. And then there's nectar feeders. These are usually set out for hummingbirds, but they also attract orioles, tanagers, and some warblers. In locations where nectar-eating bats live, they can also attract some nocturnal visitors. Now let's look to see what we put in our feeder. As with the feeders, you have plenty of options to choose from. So I'm going to touch on those foods that I have had the most success with. And the very first one is the black oil sunflower seed. These are sometimes referred to as boss, and these seeds have thin shells that most birds can crack. They have a very high fat content, so they are an excellent choice for winter feeding. And I use these in several of my feeders all year long. Now, if you feed the birds already, black oil sunflower seeds are probably a really good thing to put out this week as the temperatures start to plummet. Safflower seeds, those are those white seeds in the middle there. They are thick-shelled seeds that are a favorite among cardinals. And there are some birds, their beaks just aren't going to be strong enough to open these. And next to that is Niger. This is a favorite food of finches and buntings. You may hear this seed referred to as thistle, because at one time, thistle seed was put out for finches and buntings. However, it was discovered that the seeds were growing into an invasive plant in North America. So suppliers have switched to a different plant whose seeds are similar to thistle, and they have also been heat sterilized to limit their spread. White millet is there in the middle, and that is a favorite of ground feeders like doves and sparrows. Peanuts are popular with blue jays, crows, chickadees, titmice, and woodpeckers, and you can buy them shelled or in the shell. The shelled peanuts typically cost more, and the shell usually isn't a deterrent to whoever is eating it. Be mindful that you should only use raw, unsalted peanuts, so you don't want any boiled peanuts or seasoned or salted peanuts. My blue jays are a big fan of peanuts, and I have actually had a small peanut crop in my yard this year because they like to stash them sometimes. And suet typically comes in blocks of rendered animal fat mixed with nuts and seeds and fruits. Sometimes they even put mealworms in there. And even my Carolina wren likes the suet. Because it is rendered fat, high temperatures will cause the suet to melt. And if you have pets, they will be attracted to it. There is a no melt suet available, but I have noticed that while my birds do eat it, they much prefer the kind that melts. Nectar. So there is no reason to ever add red food coloring to your hummingbird's nectar. So while it is true that hummingbirds are attracted to the color red, having a hummingbird feeder with some red coloring on it is more than enough to draw their attention in. Red dye can cause disease and even death. So you want to make sure that whatever nectar you're putting out is not dyed red. And if you purchase it, just make sure you're purchasing dye-free nectar. And if you are making your own, and there are recipes available online, please don't ever add dye to it. And with feeders, it is very crucial to keep them clean. Several diseases like mycoplasmal conjunctivitis, which is commonly referred to as housefinch eye disease, but is not limited to just housefinches, as well as salmonella, can be transferred at feeders. So it's important to clean them frequently. Natural cleaners like vinegar and baking soda are preferred, but you can also clean with a mixture of bleach and water or biodegradable Castile soap. And always use hot water and rinse thoroughly. A hard bristled brush is really good for scrubbing. And something to keep in mind during the summertime is that nectar can spoil very quickly in hot temperatures. So it's important to empty, clean, and refill your hummingbird feeders every few days. And there are little brushes that you can purchase to clean hummingbird feeder parts, specifically the ports where they'll be inserting their tongue to get the nectar. You can just slide that in that port and it will clean it very nicely. So with food comes the need for water. Now, not all birds are drawn to feeders. So adding water can attract even more species to your yard. One hot summer's day, I had a Cooper's hawk visit one of my bird baths. This did not please my other birds. My hummingbird even dive bombed him a few times, but it was mid-August. It was very hot. All he cared about was water, and I got to watch a bird I normally don't see up close for several minutes. Now, you may be most familiar with the pedestal type of a bird bath, but birds typically prefer water sources that are at ground level. When you think about birds in the wild and where they're getting their water, they're all going to be getting their water at ground level. So it makes sense that when they visit your yard, they're going to prefer a water source at ground level. And the shade is the best location for a bird bath, especially in summer. You want to put it somewhere away from shrubbery, and this is to keep visitors safe from predators who could ambush them when they're in a pretty vulnerable state. Because not only are they going to be getting a drink of water, they're going to bathe in it, and that can make it hard for them to fly off quickly. A bird bath's water should be no deeper than 2 inches deep in the very middle. And if you'd like, you can place some rocks in the water for them to perch on. And birds are attracted to moving water. So you can add a dripper or a sprayer to your backyard water source. And as a bonus, mosquitoes will not lay eggs in water that is moving. Now, hummingbirds have trouble bathing in water the same way that other birds do. So they especially like to fly through misters or bubblers so that they can also bathe. Now, as with feeders, it is important to keep your bird baths clean. So replace the water frequently to prevent mosquitoes from hatching, as well as to keep the water sanitary. And this is especially important in summer when it's a little bit warmer and things have the heat they need to grow. And if you can, keep water available when temperatures drop below freezing. So you can use an electric heater designed for this purpose, and that is that illustration up in the top corner. Or you can just float a ping pong ball or a piece of cork in the water to keep ice from forming as the wind moves it around. Because if your feeder water can freeze, all the other water sources are probably frozen as well, and they may have trouble getting a drink of water. And that bottom right-hand picture, that is my Cooper's hawk that came and hung out in my backyard on a summer's day. It did take the pictures through the window. It's a little bit blurry.
There was a question on what was the baking soda mixture used to clean the feeders?
You can use like a kind of a damp baking soda as like a scrub and to make a paste out of it. It's just a good natural cleaner that won't leave any residue behind that could be not so great for the birds to ingest.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. So now that we have food and water covered, let's turn to shelter. So like food, there are both natural and human-assisted options for shelter. Let's first look at ways to add shelter to your yard naturally. So you can make your yard an appealing bird nursery in several ways. They're going to need a safe place to build their nest, and trees and bushes are great nesting locations. And several birds, especially hummingbirds, use spider webs in their nest. So encourage spiders to live in your yard and leave up old webs if you find them. What's neat about the hummingbird nests that use webs, it's a great way to let the nest kind of expand a little bit once the chicks get larger without the nest falling apart. And don't rake up your leaves. So not only do birds use leaves as nesting materials, many insects lay eggs in the leaves or live in leaf litter. So when birds are nesting and raising their young, they tend to switch to an insect-rich diet. So come springtime, when your birds start having babies, they're probably not going to be eating seeds as much. They need to give their babies little proteins, and they're going to be looking for insects. So a yard that is good for birds is also good for bugs. Now, snags, which is there in the middle, are dead trees. They are very useful for birds that live in trees, and just a standing dead tree is a snag. It is a home to insects. It is where cavity nesters like woodpeckers can build their nest, and it's a nice perch for all kinds of birds. You have mockingbirds, they do like to kind of fly to a high point and sing, so they'll appreciate a tall spot to do that at. Now, if you don't have a snag or your dead tree is a hazard to keep, you can add a brush pile to your yard. And while birds will most likely not nest there, it's a great shelter for birds outside nesting season. The only time a bird is going to sleep in a nest is when they have young. Once they're young fledged, they don't sleep in those nests. They can also forage for insects to eat in your brush pile. Now, if you'd like, you can leave out nesting material for birds to use, but do not put out synthetic materials like acrylic yarn or even human hair. Human hair can ensnare a bird's leg or wing, and this can cut off the circulation and even sever the limb. Dryer lint is also not good to put out because it doesn't hold up in rainy weather, so it's not a good nesting material. It may seem soft, but once that rain hits, it is not any good. So nesting boxes are another way that you can add shelter to your yard, but there's more to adding a nesting box than just putting one out. So there's many options for nest boxes. I'm just going to focus on the do's and don'ts of adding them to your yard. You can use this as a guide for selecting boxes for your backyard bird paradise. Don't use metal boxes. Think about how hot it gets in the summer and then think of how hot it would be in a metal box. Instead, get nest boxes made from untreated wood. Pine, cedar, or cypress are all good choices. And some backyard bird stores will sell nest boxes that are made from recycled plastic, and these are a good choice as well. Do be mindful of the entrance size. The right size entrance can attract a particular bird. It can also deter a bird. Now, two birds that sometimes you may not want at your feeder are the non-native invasive species, starlings, and house sparrows. So a starling cannot fit into a hole that is smaller than 1 9/16 of an inch across. And house sparrows cannot fit into a hole smaller than 1 1/4 inches. So if you're wanting to avoid letting them nest in your yard, get a nest box that is smaller than what they can fit into. And you want to make sure to not leave nest boxes vulnerable to predators. If they're mounted on a pole, set them away from places where snakes, cats, and raccoons cannot easily access them. You can also put a baffle on the pole to help deter predators from climbing. And that picture on the left is one that I took at the marsh behind the Hilton Garden Inn in Richardson. And you can notice how it is set away from the brush, and there's that baffle on there that can make climbing difficult. And do not use a nest box with a perch. Birds don't need them, and they only help predators gain access to the inside. Now, do make sure to hide your nest box somewhere where your birds can find it. If you are unsure the best place or even the best nest box to use, there is the Nest Watch tool, Right Bird, Right House, that you can use to learn what birds like which houses, where to hang them, and even which direction they should face. And don't disturb the babies. It's very exciting once the babies arrive, but you want to be mindful that they are very vulnerable little creatures. So you can peek into a nest box, but don't do so early in the morning or at dusk during the first few days of incubation or when the babies are about to fledge. And do keep your nest box clean. Once no more birds are using the nest box, you can remove the old nesting material and scrub it out with hot soapy water. I would wait until fall to do this because birds are a protected species in the United States. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 prohibits the killing, harassment, moving, or taking of the nest, eggs, or young of migratory birds. So even if a bird starts living in a box that you don't really want there, don't make it move. Now, I did mention starlings and house sparrows are not native, but you want to make sure that what is in there is what is in there. So it's best to just let them be. Let's talk about pest. So backyard pest, that term is up for interpretation. Some may include squirrels in their list of pets, while others do not. But let's look at different ways that we can deter pests, because there are some steps to do that. Common pests are invasive species of birds, rodents, insects, cats, and sometimes squirrels. So European starlings and house sparrows are an introduced species and are sometimes unwelcomed at feeders. So you can deter them by putting out only the foods they tend to dislike, such as safflower, Niger, or nectar. And you can help keep starlings away by putting wire cages over feeders. And this allows the smaller birds to access the food, but the starlings aren't going to fit. And there are feeders that are sold with the cage already there. Rodents will be attracted to the same food that birds are. So make sure you clean up food debris from beneath feeders and keep your food in cold, dry, airtight containers. This not only helps your seed stay fresh longer, it also keeps it safe from rodents and other pests as well. So I use a galvanized metal trash can with a fitted lid, and then I just pour out my seed into those boxes that are meant for like cereal storage for easy feeder filling. So I keep these in my pantry. They don't take up a lot of space like an open bag would. And instead of purchasing them brand new, I just look for them at like thrift stores or estate sales and just grab them whenever I can find them. Insects are another pest. I have the most trouble with ants coming to my hummingbird feeder because they are also attracted to that sweet nectar. And an ant moat, which there's an example of one there on the lower left-hand side, They will help prevent them from accessing the feeder, but you'll want to keep it filled with fresh water, especially in summer. It's going to evaporate quickly, so you'll want to add more water throughout the day. And occasionally, you can get insect infested birdseed. These hitchhikers can spread quickly, so separate it from your other food just as soon as you notice. I did have a pantry moth infestation due to a bag of seed. It took a while to get it taken care of, but I was able to isolate that food and put a stop to it. Now, cats are another pest that you may not consider when you're thinking of pests and birds, but outside cats kill between 2.5 and 4 billion birds every year. So if you have cats, keep them indoors, keep an eye on them, arrange your feeders and nest boxes in places where cats have no place to hide, and then ambush them. Squirrels, I love my squirrels. Some people do not like them. I do love my squirrels. I set out food specifically for them, and they typically keep away from my other feeders. I do find them funny, and I learn to recognize individuals. I give them names. This is one of my squirrels there on my shepherd hook. She is hiding from me. She kind of treated the hook like she would a tree. She saw me coming and ran to the other side. Um, Clearly, I could still see her. Her feeder was empty, so she decided to peek in and see what she could get from the other feeders. And then that other squirrel is a baby who came. He spent the morning playing with some feathers on my patio. So I really do enjoy watching them. They bring some joy into my day. And they're determined and they will try very hard to access food. So there are some things you can do to try and keep them away. Squirrel-proof bird feeders exist and can be fairly successful at keeping food away from squirrels. The most effective typically are the ones that close off access to the food once a heavier animal like a squirrel sits on it. So the squirrel can access the feeder, but their weight shuts off the access to the food. There are some foods that squirrels are said to dislike. Like people, though, different squirrels have different tastes. So safflower is something that squirrels are said to dislike. My squirrels don't seem to mind it. And foods with hot pepper added to it will deter them as well. So birds cannot taste capsaicin, which is the chemical that makes pepper taste spicy. However, mammals, like humans and squirrels, can taste it. So you can purchase birdseed with it added to it, but it does seem like some squirrels just don't mind spicy food. And baffles can also deter squirrels from accessing a feeder. But remember, squirrels are very agile. Mine seem to take baffles as a challenge rather than a deterrent. They can jump pretty far from a tree, so sometimes they'll just hop from the tree onto the feeder and bypass that baffle entirely. So we have already discussed keeping your feeders clean and how to deter pests and predators. Let's focus on a few other ways to maintain a safe space for birds. So in addition to cleaning feeders, remove soiled food quickly. Your birds are probably going to refuse to eat it anyway. So don't put out more than your birds can eat in about 1 to 2 days. If food gets wet, remove it quickly. And bird strikes are responsible for more than 1 billion bird deaths in a year. Birds can strike windows because they see reflection of vegetation and think it's open space, or they're diverted by a lit room at night. It's still not really understood why this happens, but they will strike a window into a lit room, or because they can assume their reflection is another bird, they feel they must fight. So just to discourage bird strikes, you can put decals, stickers, sun catchers, tape, or other objects on your window. It is important that they are spaced close together. My favorite decals are those that are made of prismatic vinyl. If they are on a window that faces east or west, they will cast rainbows into your home when the sun shines through them. So it kind of does double duty, protects birds, keeps them safe, and adds a little rainbow and sparkle into your room. And some decals have a coating that reflects ultraviolet light from the sun. So you probably won't notice the difference, but birds can see it more clearly. And so that one picture at the top left shows what you see and then what birds see when there's ultraviolet technology in that decal. And turn off all non-essential lights at night. And if possible, install downward facing amber lights for those lights outside that you keep on. And during the migration seasons, so spring, which will start at the end of February, and of course fall when everyone's going to their winter quarters, there's a big push to go lights out for wildlife to turn off all those non-essential lights as they migrate. Now, helping a window strike victim. If you see a bird suffering from a window strike in your yard, they may seem a little disoriented or just acting weird. They're sitting there very still. Birds don't do that. That's a good sign that it probably struck a window. And it can be in your yard or anywhere else. Just approach it gently from behind, cover it with both your hands, hold it securely, but don't squeeze, and place it in a cardboard box, preferably with tissues or towels. Place this box somewhere dark, quiet, and warm. And if it's not looking like it's recovered and can fly off on its own, find a wildlife rehabilitator to contact for further instructions. The Texas Parks and Wildlife maintains a list of wildlife rehabilitators that is searchable by county. And just a few weeks ago, I came into work and I found a stunned winter wren. And so I was able to put it in a box and then it did fly away and I didn't have to contact anyone. He was good. And unfortunately, birds do die. You may have birds die from window strikes or from disease. If you're feeding birds, birds who eat other birds do live in your neighborhood and will view your feeder as a nice bird buffet. My Cooper's hawk, once he found out I was there, has eaten several doves in my backyard. So if you find a deceased bird, or in the event that someone has eaten part of one, just the remains of one, pick it up while wearing gloves, put it in a plastic bag, put that bag into another bag, and dispose of it in the trash, and then make sure to wash your hands with hot water and soap. And then just be mindful of any holiday decorations that you put up outdoors. Net lighting and those fake spider webs that are pretty popular at Halloween can be fatal if a bird gets stuck in them. And you can see in that picture there, that is an owl that got tangled in some Halloween fake spider webs. And if you do hang up garlands and wreaths and lights, just check them frequently to make sure no animals are ensnared in there. And I have heard of birds nesting in wreaths before. So if you're changing your wreaths, just check before you take it down to make sure no one's taken up residence. So enjoy your birds as they come into your yard. It is just a very rewarding experience to watch them. I can spend hours watching my backyard wildlife. I keep a pair of binoculars and a camera close at hand, as well as a few bird guides. So field guides are an individual preference. It's best to explore different books to see which one works best for your needs. Now, my favorite is that second one in the screenshot of our catalog, the Birds of Texas Field Guide. I really like it because it's done by color. So if you see a green bird in your yard, you can just flip through to look at only the green birds. But during migration seasons, you might see some unfamiliar visitors from other parts of the country. They may be passing through and stop for a rest, or they may be spending the season with you. For example, white-crowned sparrows breed in the Arctic Circle in Canada, but they migrate to North Texas in the winter. So for this reason, it's a good idea to have a field guide to North American birds as well. My favorite is the Peterson Field Guide to Birds. And you can use the library catalog to find different bird guides to explore and see which one you like the best. And it's always a good idea to become familiar with the birds that live in your neighborhood. 15 to 20 bird species will make up 99% of your neighborhood bird sightings. So consider these your baseline birds. The more you become familiar with these birds, the easier it's going to be to recognize them by sight and sound. When you see someone that's unusual, you're going to pick up on it quickly. So the very first time an indigo bunting appeared in my yard, I zoomed in on it like immediately because, well, I had blue jays. I had never had something that bright blue in my yard before. But sometimes referring to a field guide while birding is difficult. The Merlin Bird ID app was created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to help birders answer the question, what's that bird? It's free to download and is available for both Apple and Android devices. And so those 4 screenshots there in the center and on the right of the screen are from the Android version. It has 2 great bird identifying features. There's the option to upload a photo of a mystery bird, and then the app will help you identify it. So you can see there, that is a picture of a robin, and it ID'd it for me as a robin. The sound ID, which is my favorite feature, will allow you to identify birds by their call. You just allow the app to run when you hear birdsong, and it will let you know who is singing. And so that is how I found out that every summer a common nighthawk comes and lives in my neighborhood, which is really, really neat. Now, for this, though, the birds need to be close by or really loud, like a crow or a blue jay, in order to be picked up by the app. Now, I have heard of some people putting their phone into a cup to amplify the sound and pick it up more. And ambient noise like traffic or in the summer, cicadas can make it difficult to pick up a bird song. It can also be tricked by a mockingbird. So if you suddenly are having a lot of birds you don't usually have in your yard, take a look around and see if a mockingbird is nearby because he could be the culprit. Merlin Bird ID will maintain a life list of all the birds you have identified with it, and all your IDs will be recorded as a checklist in eBird, which I'll touch on in a moment. So it does have its limits. You want to use it along with your bird field guides, and you can always crowdsource an ID by uploading a picture to the iNaturalist app. This happened to me recently. I saw a juvenile hawk out at Oak Point, and I just couldn't decide if it was a Cooper's or a red shoulder. And thanks to iNaturalist, they helped me narrow it down. It was a red-shouldered hawk. I also like to keep a notebook of the birds that I see. So each day I just list who has visited my yard. Some of my favorite birds never set wing in my yard, but I hear them overhead. So in August, I hear my Mississippi kites calling overhead as they prepare to migrate to South America. And all summer, I enjoy watching chimney swifts chase bugs in the evenings. So keeping track of the first time I hear them gives me something to look forward to, the dark days of winter. I do not enjoy winter. I am always ready for summer. And then alternatively, recording the first time I see my snowbirds, which are my white-throated sparrows and dark-eyed junco each year, helps me look forward to seeing them as the days grow shorter. I did mention just a moment ago eBird, so if you would like to go a step further with your bird watching, there are 3 citizen science opportunities from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that you can participate in. Now, citizen science is a collaboration between scientists and people who are curious or concerned about the world around them and are motivated to make a difference. eBird is an app whose goal is to gather information about birds in the form of checklists of bird species. They archive those checklists and they are freely shared to power data-driven approaches to science, conservation, and education. And we do have a virtual program about eBird on Monday, February 3rd, that's going to go into more detail about it. Nest Watch is a project where citizen scientists monitor bird nests and record data on species, eggs, and young to help scientists understand how climate change, urbanization, and land use affects breeding birds. And you can learn more about this at the Nest Watch's website. Now, Project Feeder Watch is a project where citizen scientists count birds who visit their feeders from November to April. So it's something that is running right now. And this helps scientists monitor changes in the abundance and distribution of birds. Please note this does require an $18 annual participation fee, as the project is supported almost entirely by participants. However, you do receive a poster of common birds who visit your feeders when you join. So in addition to bird guides in our collection, PPL also has books about feeding birds and planting bird-friendly plants. A search for bird feeding narrowed down to just adult nonfiction there on the left-hand side of the catalog should get you a good start in browsing our online catalog. Some titles include Feed the Birds, Attract and Identify 196 Common North American Birds by Chris Early. I especially like this one because it is organized by bird. So if you see a new visitor to your yard, you can look them up and see what they eat, and hopefully you can encourage them to stick around by putting out their favorite food. Another good one is 100 Plants to Feed the Birds. Turn Your Home Garden into a Healthy Bird Habitat by Laura Erickson. If you use books like this one, just keep in mind that they typically are not local. They're going to focus on the entire United States. So just make sure that the plants you are interested in grow in Texas. And magazines. For those card holders with digital access, you can access bird magazines through Libby and Press Reader. So the Libby app gives you access to the Birds in Bloom magazine, the Audubon magazine, and a British publication called Bird Watching. And then Press Reader gives you access to Birdwatch, which is another British publication. And so while what they share may not really be relevant to North America, it's kind of neat to see what other countries are looking at, and there might be some tips and tricks for your own backyard. Through the National Wildlife Federation, you can get your yard certified as a wildlife habitat if your yard provides a minimum of 3 natural sources of food, your yard has at least 2 places for wildlife to find shelter from weather or predators, your yard has at least 2 places for wildlife to engage in courtship behavior, mating, and bearing and raising young, and if you employ at least 2 sustainable practices from 4 categories, such as soil and water conservation, controlling non-native species, reducing pollution, and reduce, reuse, and recycle. You can find out more on the National Wildlife Federation's website. The registration fee for either a business or residential certification is just $20, and all schools are free. If anyone has questions or needs assistance with getting their yard certified as a wildlife habitat, please feel free to contact Andrea Chick. She is a senior water conservation coordinator for the city of Plano. We'll drop her email there in the chat, and she can answer questions and help you register. And this checklist worksheet is available on their website, and it just kind of guides you through figuring out if your yard qualifies. And then you can also, I think it's an additional fee, but you can get a nice little sign to stick in your yard, letting others know that this is a certified wildlife habitat. So what is next? Enjoy your birds. The more I watch the birds, the more I know them as individuals. I give my frequent visitors names. So my cardinals are Pete and Lady. I named Pete after the children's book character Pete the Cat, because if you've read them, you know he just keeps moving along, singing a song, and Pete loves to sing, and Lady is his lady. They've raised several broods of babies, and watching them bring fledglings to my feeders for the first time is just the highlight of my spring. Lady is a hands-off mother. Pete worries constantly. He feeds them long after they should be able to feed themselves. It annoys his wife, but he loves his babies. If you want to learn more about citizen science, join us on February 3rd at 6 o'clock for our Be a Citizen Scientist eBird virtual program. If you would like to attend some in-person programs, we have a family program on February 15th at 3 p.m. That is at the Schimmelpfennig Library. And you will make your own wildflower seed bombs, so you can add those to your yard for your birds and for the pollinators. And on February 18th at Haggard Library, the Sustainability and Environmental Education Division of the City of Plano is presenting Container Gardening, Small Spaces, Big Success. And then you can always look online on the Texas Ornithological Society's page, the Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center, which is in Cedar Hill, and the Trinity River Audubon Center in Dallas. They frequently host birding workshops, and you can see their calendar of events and see what they are up to there. All right, well, thank you. If you have any questions, please share them in the chat. If you think of one later, you can always submit it through our Ask a Librarian service on our website. Whoever is monitoring that will see a bird-related question come through and know to get it to me. For brush
Okay.
pile,
Okay,
go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry. It looks like you can see the questions now.
Yeah, it
Perfect.
popped up. For brush pile, whatever is in your yard, something to keep in mind with brush is don't transport it from somewhere else. That's kind of how like pest for trees like the emerald ash borer and things like that get spread. So as you are just trimming your yard, use that to build up a brush pile. You can use the tree pieces to kind of build your base and stack other things around it. And you can transport things that are not too far away. So like, let's say a neighbor may have trimmed a tree and have things sitting out at the curb. If they're okay with you taking it, that's okay to include in your yard, but you don't want to go to somewhere really further than a block away and add it to your yard. The For the anything that grows in a water dish, it's not something I'm familiar with the type. I just scrub it out. So on my sprinkler head for my water hose, I turn it on like the jet setting and spray as much of it out as I can. And then I get the stiff bristled brush and scrub it and spray it out. And then you can always, I have one water dish that's dishwasher safe, so I'll just stick it in my dishwasher. Everything else I'll bring in and clean in my sink. So I have hot water there, and then I just disinfect my sink really well. Yeah, it's pretty persistent. Another thing, just empty your water and refill it quickly or frequently to prevent it from growing. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. Please stay up to date with the Plano Public Library by following our Facebook and Instagram. Our website, which was dropped into the chat earlier, we have a lot of programs coming up this spring for you to enjoy. You can see all of them there. Please take some time to complete our program survey, which should pop up following this program. We value your feedback and thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you next time.